The most dangerous thing in this war right now is not that the talks collapse. The most dangerous thing is that everyone is pretending there are still talks. I have watched many crises in my life, and the first rule is simple. A real negotiation has movement, it has concessions, it has a narrowing gap. What we have now is not that. What we have now is a suspended war with a naval blockade still in place, Iran still holding leverage in the Strait of Hormuz, Israel still pressing the battlefield in Lebanon, and Washington still saying it has all the cards while refusing to put those cards on the table. That is not peace. That is pressure waiting for a spark. The headline is that President Trump called off the American negotiating team that was supposed to go to Islamabad. He said it was too much travel, too expensive, too much time wasted flying 15 or 16 hours to meet people nobody had heard of. That explanation sounds small because it is supposed to sound small. It turns a strategic failure into a scheduling complaint. But when a president cancels a negotiation over one of the most dangerous conflicts on earth and says the problem is airfare, you should not listen to the excuse. You should look at the structure underneath it. The structure is this. The United States and Iran no longer agree on what the negotiation is even about. America wants Iran to come back under pressure, open Hormuz, accept limits on its nuclear program, restrict its missiles, and reduce the regional power of the forces Iran supports. Iran wants the blockade removed first, the Strait of Hormuz reopened on terms that preserve Iranian leverage, frozen assets addressed, and Israel restrained in Lebanon. Those are not small differences. Those are two different maps. That is where we are. The ceasefire deadline has passed, but the war has not restarted in the old open form. The blockade remains, Hormuz remains restricted, oil remains trapped, Iran remains battered, but not broken, America remains powerful, but not finished. Israel remains eager to keep pressure on. Pakistan tried to act as a mediator, but Tehran now sees Pakistan as carrying Washington's message more than mediating between the two sides. That leaves us in the most dangerous state a conflict can enter, not war, not peace. Limbo. And limbo is unstable because every actor uses the pause differently, but physical reality does not care about rumors. If millions of barrels per Dalton Y are not exiting the Strait of Hormuz, the world eventually feels it. Maybe not on the first day, maybe not on the first week. Oil moves slowly. Ships that left before the closure still arrive. Refineries still work through inventory. Governments release reserves. Airlines hedge fuel. Retail fuel prices lag the underlying shock. So for a while, people convince themselves the crisis is manageable. Then the lag ends. That is the part most people miss. An oil shock is not always a lightning strike. Sometimes it is a wave traveling through the plumbing. First it hits the Gulf, then it hits Asia, then refined products get tight, then diesel matters more than crude, then jet fuel disappears from schedules, then airlines cut flights, then tourism weakens, then food distribution gets expensive. Then the public finally notices. By then, the damage has already moved from a military event into the real economy. That is why I do not take comfort when a government says the blockade is in place, but the war is not restarted. A blockade is an act of war wearing a bureaucratic suit. It is still coercion. It still damages trade. It still forces choices. And it still gives the other side a reason to respond. Iran has already said how it might respond. Its vice president warned that if Iranian infrastructure, including oil wells, is damaged because of the blockade, 4 times the damage will be inflicted on the same kind of infrastructure in countries supporting the aggressor. That is not a casual sentence. That is Iran telling Gulf states that this war will not remain abstract for them if they continue to enable American pressure. The message is aimed at Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and every state whose oil terminals, refineries, ports, and gas infrastructure sit inside Iranian missile range. Iran knows it cannot defeat the United States Navy in a clean naval contest, but Iran does not need to defeat the United States Navy to create pain. It only needs to make the price of continuing the blockade higher than the price of negotiating with Iran. That is the logic of asymmetric leverage. A rich man with a large house can still be frightened by a small fire in the right room. America says it has all the cards. Trump repeated that phrase. He said, Iran has no leaders, no military left, no cards. But in business, I have learned that people usually repeat. I have all the leverage when they are worried the other side still has one piece they cannot ignore. Iran's piece is Hormuz, and that piece is not gone. The blockade exists in name, but the actual enforcement is murkier than the statement. Tanker tracking suggests some ships have turned back, others have slipped through, some vessels have loaded, some have avoided detection, some may have used the confusion of war, weather, routing, and classification to move oil. Anyway, that does not mean the blockade is fake. It means the blockade is imperfect. And imperfect blockades create more danger than clean ones. Meanwhile, the mines matter. Current intelligence suggests Iran has laid more mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Reports estimate it could take months to clear the waterway completely if that is true. Then even a deal is not a light switch. You do not simply announce peace and watch normal traffic resume the next morning. Ships need channels, insurers need confidence, captains need coordinates. Iran, if it knows where the mines are, retains a practical role in making the waterway usable. Again, that is leverage, not elegant leverage, not moral leverage, but real leverage. The same principle applies to the Pakistani track. Pakistan had an interest in mediation because it depends heavily on gas from Qatar and needs Hormuz open. But Iran has now signaled that Pakistan is not an impartial broker. Iranian advisors accuse Pakistan of repeating American positions, failing to hold Washington to earlier commitments, and acting less like a mediator than a messenger. That matters because when a mediator loses the trust of one side, the negotiation does not die publicly. It hollows out privately. That is why Foreign Minister Iraqi, as travel list matters, Islamabad, Muscat, Moscow, Pakistan may still be part of the route. But Iran is widening the route. Oman matters because it was a key channel before the war. Moscow matters because Russia can give Iran diplomatic weight, military coordination, and strategic backing against Washington. The absence of Beijing from the public list also matters because China often prefers to operate where the cameras are not pointed. That is not a country with no cards. The other player people underestimate is Israel. Israel does not want a half-finished war. If it believes Iran's nuclear missile and proxy networks remain capable of rebuilding, that means Israel has every incentive to keep the pressure alive, especially in Lebanon. If Hezbollah is still engaging, if Israel is still striking, if casualties keep rising, then the idea that there is a clean ceasefire becomes fiction. A ceasefire on one front while another front burns is not peace. It is segmentation. And segmentation is fragile because one front can pull the others back into fire. So when people ask whether the war is over, I think they are asking the wrong question. The better question is whether the incentives that produced the war have changed. They have not. That is not a settlement. That is a balance of forces with a thin sheet over it. That is why the deal is so hard. If America removes the blockade for Hormuz access without nuclear progress, Iran proves the blockade failed. If America keeps the blockade, oil pressure rises and Iran keeps the ability to retaliate economically. If America escalates militarily, Iran can target regional infrastructure and the war widens. If America waits, the limbo becomes more expensive. Those are not good options. They are different costs. Something has to change. Either the blockade begins to work and Iran returns with a real proposal, or the blockade fails to produce surrender and America must decide whether to keep bleeding global supply chains, or Israel creates a new fact on the ground, or Iran uses a mine missile proxy or infrastructure threat to prove that limbo is not free. That is how many crises work. So I would watch less of the rhetoric and more of the plumbing. That will tell you where the war is going faster than any speech. The most important sentence in this whole episode may not be Trump. S claim that America has all the cards. It may be the Iranian warning that damage to Iranian infrastructure will be answered 4 times over against countries that support the aggressor. That sentence turns the conflict from a duel into a network risk. It tells every Gulf capital that the price of American pressure could land on their ports, wells, pipelines, and terminals. Once that happens, Washington's coalition changes. Allies who wanted Iran contained begin wanting the blockade ended. States that supported pressure begin fearing retaliation. The war stops being a moral argument and becomes a balance sheet problem. And balance sheets have a way of disciplining everybody. I do not know whether the next move is a deal, a strike, a market shock, or another week of strange limbo. But I do know this. When a negotiation collapses, a blockade remains, oil is trapped. Mines are in the water, Israel is still hitting Lebanon, Iran is threatening infrastructure, and the President of the United States says the reason he canceled talks was that travel took too long. You are not looking at stability. You are looking at a crisis that has not yet chosen its final shape. And in markets, as in war, the period before the shape becomes obvious is usually when the cheapest mistakes are made. The public waits for the headline. The professionals watch the pressure. And right now, the pressure is still building.